right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our session today. We'll be discussing not only identity in the cloud, but also mobility, kind of dovetailing off of our new CEO's presentation earlier this morning, talking about Office for iPad and the new Enterprise Mobility Suite. And I will be driving into much greater detail on what all's included within the Enterprise Mobility Suite. I'm sharing out my entire desktop, and I've got a few slides, a lot of demonstrations today, but I'd like to get things started with some whiteboarding. Now, if you think back to once upon a time, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, everything was in the bubble. All of your users came into the office each day. They had a large beige box of a workstation sitting on their desk. Was domain joined, attached to Active Directory, and all of your apps were there within your data center as well, tightly coupled with AD. And it was a pretty good end user experience. It was great for the security people. Everything was well in hand. But that's not the world we live in today. Today, users have left the building. And they didn't take the big beige box with them. They have Ultrabooks and tablets and iPads and Galaxies and maybe a Surface or two. Also, a lot of your applications have left the building, whether they're hosted in a partner's data center or maybe somewhere in the cloud, software as a service, so on and so forth. Now, most of the enterprises I work with have had quite an interesting time accounting for these changes. They have had no choice but to take a piecemeal approach. And oftentimes the first thing they'll decide to do is, oh, well, the users are remote, so we need VPN technology. So let's go buy a VPN, maybe Cisco or Juniper or something like that. Then the next thing they'll come to realize is, well, we don't want to give everybody full network access. Maybe we just want to publish some applications. So let's go buy web access management, maybe SiteMinder from CA or Oracle Access Manager, something like that. And then they very quickly realize those are unmanaged devices. We may not even want applications going out there. We may want to host that internally with virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI. So let's go buy some of that as well. You still have your on-premises management platform. It could be Altera's, could be System Center, BigFig, something like that. But that doesn't do a whole lot for your consumer devices out there that they have at the Starbucks or their home office or something like that. So you have to buy something else to manage all of these iPads and Galaxies and things like that. So maybe you go and buy Mobile Iron or AirWatch or Good or something like that. Thinking about identities, you might have technology there on premises to manage your identities, integrate with your directories, your databases there within your legacy applications, and that's all fine and great. Maybe you have a separate solution for multi-factor authentication. Maybe you need an entire system and infrastructure to bestow upon everyone the privilege of carrying around a token. Everyone loves that, right? And then your applications now that are outside of your data center. Well, you want federated single sign-on, so you need to go and buy more technology for that. And then after a few dozen SaaS applications, you're like, oh my goodness, our old on-premises identity solution can't really handle that. There's not much for that. So let's go and buy identity solution in the cloud. Now, what you're left with is what I refer to as the NASCAR drawing. Because in my mind, that's what it looks like. It looks like a NASCAR with all the stickers, all the logos, all the sponsorships, all the different vendors, all the different technology that you have to maintain in your footprint, all of the different skill sets you have to maintain on your payroll, all of the different consoles you have to go to administer your policy, to run your auditing, your compliance reports. But you had no choice. Everybody did it this way. Everyone had to take a piecemeal approach. So with that, just a point I wanted to make, let's get out of the whiteboard and let's please indulge me with a few PowerPoint slides just to kind of tee up the conversation, and then we will get quickly to some demonstrations. So we've talked about mobility, we've talked about cloud, other big, undeniable mega trends are social, big data, so on and so forth. And we could talk at great length about the impacts of security on each one. We could talk about how mobility's broadened the attack surface. We could talk about how social has changed the attack vector. Spear phishing has been very, very popular over the past year or two because of social networking. But I don't want to go into detail on all that because we only have an hour today. But the point I want to make is the common thread across all of these big mega trends is you. Specifically, it's your identity. We are a devices and services company now, and the conduit between the device in your hand and that back-end service, whether it's hosted in your data center or somewhere in the cloud, maybe software as a service, the conduit between the device and the back-end service is your identity. Now, our investments reflect a transformation. You see here some of our logos, some of our offerings spanning everything from consumer to enterprise, to devices, to services, to collaboration, and all points in between. And at this point, let me go into a demonstration. So back to the whiteboard very quickly. If you think about the whole paradigm here, you have quite the foundation of identity and access goodness there within Active Directory. 95% of corporations throughout the world, when they saddle up each morning and hit Control-Alt-Delete, it's with Active Directory. That's how they start out their day. That's how they authenticate. So in all of our new offerings, our core platforms, things like Windows Server, things that you already own, things like Windows Azure, the whole game here is taking that foundation of identity and access goodness in AD and extending it out to those remote users on the device of their choice. And also taking that foundation of identity and access goodness and extending it up to the cloud. Not just Microsoft Cloud, not just Office 365, but we have integration with hundreds, actually over 1,000 of the most popular SaaS applications in use today. So without further ado, let's do a little demonstration. And I have here with me an iPad. I bet you didn't expect to see one of those there in today's session. I'm not overly familiar with this, so let me get it going here. And you can see here I've got Wi-Fi connectivity. I'm going to open up Safari. And I'm going to key in a URL. I'm going to go to SharePoint.contosodemo.com. And it's asking me for my credentials. And if you can zoom in tight here, you'll see that I get an access denied error message. And I'll share this out with a Windows host. This doesn't even have a USB port. I'm not sure how to project that. But the policy here for this particular website requires identity-based authentication, my AD credentials, but also requires device-based authentication. I have to come in from a known device. Now, if you're doing this on Windows, it's built into the operating system. For our friends here on iPads, it's a web-driven experience. So to register this device, which is what I'm doing now, I need to key in my credentials again. And it also prompts me for multiple factors of authentication. So the policy for SharePoint was identity-based authentication and then also device-based authentication. To actually go and make this a registered device, it's identity-based authentication, and then it's going to invoke multi-factor. So I will hit continue. And here we have a phone call.
Microsoft sign-in verification system. Please press the pound key to finish your verification. If you did not initiate, you have been signed in. Goodbye.
So what you just witnessed was 3 different authenticators. You witnessed identity-based authentication when I keyed in my credentials. You witnessed device-based authentication. And you witnessed multi-factor authentication. And that could be a phone call, an SMS message, any number of things. So now what it's asking me to do is to install a profile. Let me turn it back around while I enter my code. And it's generating a key, enrolling a certificate. So it is taking a certificate from contosodemo.com, my employer, and installing it on this device. There's also a record of that certificate stored in Active Directory as well. That's what enables the bidirectional state of trust. So we have our profile installed. And for any of you iPad fans out there, you know all about that. So let's go back here and pull up a new iteration of Safari. And I've got it bookmarked. Let's go to the SharePoint site, same one we were before. And it's prompting me for my AD credentials. So this time, when I hit sign in, we'll give it a minute, I get SharePoint, whereas before I got the access denied. Now I'm coming in with both a good identity and a good device, a known device, and it knows that because of the certificate installed. And what we call this is our people-centric IT approach. So you have users, and they carry multiple devices. You see all the different logos here. And that's a one-to-many relationship. Well, then you have different apps across those devices, and that's a many-to-many relationship. Kind of think of it as the Cartesian product. And then you factor in your data. And this is where things start to get important for corporations. Because up until then, PCI, SOX, HIPAA, they didn't really care. It was only when your sensitive information, your corporate information got on those apps, on those devices for that user, that you start to really have to be concerned about this. And if you try to manage all the different use cases here, this type of data in this app on this device, you're gonna drive yourself crazy. And this is where our multi-threaded, multi-pronged, holistic, all-up approach to mobility and cloud really starts to make a lot of sense. You know, if you think back to the NASCAR drawing and trying to configure across all those different technologies, your different policies for all the different devices, for all the different apps, for all the different types of data, that's a bit overwhelming. There is a simpler way. So with 2012 R2, you see here users with their devices. We have new functionality where you can register or workplace join your device, and that's what you just witnessed on the iPad and on my Windows 8.1 client. And what that does is it generates a certificate, and it places that certificate on that device. Installs a profile on the iPad or loads it natively on Windows, and it also creates a record to store in Active Directory that is tied to that certificate. So what you're left with is a bidirectional state of trust that can be terminated by either party at any time. If you decide that it's time to retire, or you hit the lottery or whatever, you just go back, hit leave the organization, or uninstall the profile, and the trust is severed. If you get terminated, or the employer wants to terminate or revoke your access, they terminate that user object. Or, you know, here's one. If you leave your device in the back of the taxi, and he's off to the pawn shop. That device is gone. Your user object, let's leave that enabled, but let's just get rid of that record for that specific device. So powerful stuff there. You can also take it a step further, and you can enroll your device for management when we're going to do that with our Windows Intune cloud service. That's our MDM platform, and we go through the same APIs that everyone else does. You know, Apple on iOS offers up a set of APIs, Google on Android, they offer up a set of APIs, and we, Microsoft on Windows, offer up a set of APIs. And that's what AirWatch uses, Mobile Iron, Good, Windows Intune, they all go through the same front door for that device. So two different levels of trust here. You have the registration where you've got a certificate, they've got a record, and that's great. Another bigger level of trust is full-on management. Now what this does is it opens up a wonderful front door into your applications and services. If you want full-on network connectivity, you can have that with Windows Server. If it's a domain join Windows device, you can do that with direct access. Fantastic, instant on, always on experience. If it's something else, then we've got VPN. This middle tier here is our web application proxy. This is a brand new feature in Windows Server 2012 R2. And this is web publishing. It could be SharePoint, it could be Outlook web app, or it could be Joe's Java application running on WebSphere. I don't really care. It's all port 80 or more than likely port 443. And then thirdly up here, we have the RD Gateway, which VDI. If you want to stream out applications, then that's a great way to do it. So going back to my lab, I've got another client over here that is already fully enrolled for management. And to show you some of this capability being managed by Windows Intune, we've got some apps. We've got the company portal. And the company portal's available in iTunes. It's available in Google Play. And of course the Windows Store. So I have to log in. Make sure I didn't fat finger something. There we go. So this is a rich client application that is your self-service portal into this new world of bring your own device, of mobility. You can see here the applications recommended by my company, Contoso. And there's two different types of applications here in this catalog. You have consumer apps, things like Skype or OneNote or Link. And then you have, and these are from Microsoft. If this were on the iPad, it would be from iTunes or Google Play on Android. But then you also have apps that would be side-loaded by the organization. So if I want to click on one of these, I can install it. So it's up to me. It's people-centric. Whatever device I want to bring to the table, I log into the company portal, and based on the security guidelines set forth by my organization, I might could install it, I might not. It depends. Also, I can see all of my devices. So if I left my Surface in the back of the cab and couldn't find it, I'm one click away from removing it, from severing the tie. And once that tie is broken, remember, bidirectional state of trust, once that's broken, all of your corporate applications are remotely wiped. Any data that you may have synchronized via work folders or OneDrive or whatever, all of that is remotely wiped as well. I'm going to open up Windows Explorer here. And you can see here I've got this thing called work folders. This is my home drive. If I go to my domain join machine, I pull this up, this is my information. And this is synchronized across all of my devices. Notice it's green in color, that means it's encrypted. And guess what the key is to decrypt that? The certificate that you got when you registered your device. So once that bidirectional state of trust is broken, the state is remotely wiped as well. You no longer have access to that. The interest of time, I'm going to move things along a little bit more quickly here. One other thing I'll show you is remote desktop, and we have this app in iTunes and Google Play as well. And again, if there is an app that is highly sensitive that I don't want executing out there in the wild, I can stream it out over VDI. So you can see here, remote app is coming up. And what did I click on? Calculator. So calc.exe, apparently I hit it twice, is not executing here locally on this device. It's executing back on a server in my data center. Just the keyboard, the video, the mouse are streamed out to my desktop. Another tactic to have in your BYOD program. So with that, we've been talking about how to take that foundation of identity and access goodness in AD and extend it out to the end user. I've showed you some of the things you can do with Windows Server 2012 R2, Workplace Join, network connectivity, app publishing, VDI, you've seen all that. At this point, I want to pivot and head up to the cloud. So if you think about identities in the cloud, you've got your corporate identity there on premises in Active Directory. And if you subscribe to a software as a service offering, could be Office 365, could be Salesforce, they all kind of work similarly. They need a record of your identity. And this is not a Microsoft thing. This is a software as a service thing. If you subscribe to Salesforce, they have a directory synchronization tool that you can download, put on a little 1U box, and synchronize all of your accounts in Active Directory up to Salesforce. Most enterprises are going to want a federated single sign-on. So once you have that authenticated state down here in your premises, then that you want to extend that out to your SaaS application. So there's typically two pieces of conduit there for most SaaS applications. And leveraging conventional tactics, that's pretty well managed for a couple of apps. Once you get out to a dozen or so, the thought of having a dozen dir syncs and a dozen federated trusts, that isn't really appealing to me. That can become unwieldy. So what we've done with Azure Active Directory, notice here that Azure Active Directory is our identity data store for all of our SaaS apps. Every Office 365 customer has a record in Azure AD. Every Dynamics customer, every Intune customer has a record in Azure AD. And if you think about this in terms of your traditional on-premises identity management solution, ours is Forefront Identity Manager. Azure AD is just another connected system. So let's talk a little bit more about identity in the cloud. You have your organizational accounts there on premises. More and more of your applications exist elsewhere. You may even have consumer identity providers. It's great for B to customer, business to customer, business to individual. And then also devices, everything we talked about earlier, having identity-based authentication as well as device-based authentication. All of these are aspects of identity in the cloud. So when we sat down to create Azure Active Directory, we took all of these into consideration. And what you have is very easy capability to synchronize your accounts on premises into Azure AD. In fact, if you're on Office 365, you're already doing that. So don't think of it as either or. Don't think of it as AD on-prem or AD in the cloud. Think of AD in the cloud, Azure AD. Think of that as an extension of your AD on premises. We also have pre-integration with over 1,000, 1,133 at this moment in time, software as a service applications. You're able to factor in devices, and you're able to factor in consumer identity providers, if you're so inclined. All of that is optional. So what is Azure AD? It's the world's largest cloud-based identity and access solution by like a factor of 20. I mean, it is ginormously huge. Dozens of millions of user objects. It's actually averaging lately over 12 billion authentications per week. I mean, it is massively, massively large. And it provides single sign-on to cloud-based applications. It can do provisioning to cloud-based applications in a lot of cases. I mean, it's kind of dependent upon what APIs they open up to us. And it offers a large set of these features at no cost. Let's take a little bit closer look at this. I'm going to log into the Azure portal. And Azure contains a lot of things. It contains all of our infrastructure as a service offerings. It contains all of our platform as a service offerings. So I'm going to go down here to Azure Active Directory. And you can see here I have a couple defined. And you can see my users. And you can notice they're sourced from either AD on-prem, Azure AD, some other instance of Azure AD. It tells you where that identity was minted. But let's go take a look at applications. If I wanted to add one, we've got 1,133, as I mentioned. They're categorized. You can see the featured ones or highlighted ones there. And I've already added a few. So I was picking on Salesforce earlier. Let's look at that. So here for Salesforce, they've been around for a while. They've got a pretty rich API, so we can see single sign-on. You can do a federated trust, or you can do credential replay, whatever you like, however you integrate with Salesforce. You could do provisioning into Salesforce, and for that you would need an administrative account. So this is pretty powerful, and everything I've showed you so far in Azure is free. So if you think back to the drawing here, it's all about taking that foundation of identity goodness with AD, extending it out to that remote user on the device of their choosing, and also reaching up into the SaaS applications in the cloud. So we've done that with our core workloads, things you already own, Windows Server and Windows Azure. Now, while that's great and that gives you a lot of capability, most of our enterprises that want a fully featured bring your own device or mobility or consumerization type program want a little bit more. And if you caught Satya's first press conference today, they talked a lot about Office on iPad and Android and things like that. They also mentioned our Enterprise Mobility Suite. And in the time we have remaining, that's really what I would like to focus on. Here's some more details. So if you think about our vision for the cloud operating system, enterprise-grade platform, everything is housed in a global foundation services data center, which has strict compliance with security controls, and we're able to attest to that and provide the SSAE 16s. We've got the SOCs, we've got the PCI, the FISMA, the FedRAMP, all of that enterprise-grade platform. We also have a hybrid design, and we're pretty unique in that. Most traditional software companies want to keep everything in your data center on premises. Most cloud companies want to get you completely out of your data center and into the cloud, and they want to keep you there. We are unique in that we want to do both, and we want to give you the capability to seamlessly maneuver, throttle up, throttle down those resource allocations for whatever makes sense for your business. And of course, thirdly, we have our people-focused approach. Whatever you as a user, whatever device you want to bring, you have access to your applications in accordance with your company policy. We have some statistics here from Forrester and Gartner. Multiple devices, multiple operating systems. This is a reality, and it's still trending upwards. It's not plateaued yet. More people-centric IT. We talked about that. So here's the Enterprise Mobility Suite, and this will be available as of April 1st. It was announced this morning. And for enterprise mobility, we take a three-pronged approach. We do hybrid identity management. We do mobile device management, device security and device management. And then we also do strong authentication and information protection. And the price is right. This is a lot of functionality for a minimal investment. Classic good, better, best scenario. All of our solutions on premises, Exchange 2013, SharePoint 2013, similar capability as to what you have in the cloud, maybe not as much collaborative capability, but similar functionality, so that's good. Moving to the cloud gives you better capability to collaborate outside of your organizational boundaries, so I'm going to call that better. And then the best is combining that with Enterprise Mobility Suite. Being able to manage not only what apps get on this device, but also being able to manage their back-end access, provisioning an account into your system that you're administering or some SaaS application like we saw earlier with Salesforce. If you think about the competition, kind of going back to the NASCAR drawing, there are a lot of people out there doing identity in the cloud. There's a different casting characters doing identity on premises. We're pretty unique in doing both. But that's one set of casting characters. They don't have a whole lot of capability in terms of mobile device management. So looking at those guys, that's yet another group of people, another set of technology, another list of options that you have, and they all go through the same APIs offered up by the device manufacturers. And then information protection, yet another set of cast and crew. With the Enterprise Mobility Suite, one vendor, one contract, one SKU, one support vehicle, one throat to choke, one back to pat, one cheek to kiss, whatever you want to call it. This is new. This did not exist before today. Earlier, when you think to the whiteboard drawing, I said you had no choice but to go piecemeal. And that's the way everyone did it. That's the way we did it. But now you do have a choice. You have one single vendor, one single contract, one single SKU that has a holistic story with tight integration across all the different verticals, all the different pillars. And the specific offerings included are Azure AD Premium, Windows Intune, and Azure Rights Management. Let's talk about each of these quickly in a little bit more detail. So with Azure Active Directory, many applications, one identity repository. You saw the catalog with all the different applications. Imagine when someone gets transitioned into the sales department, that they automatically get assigned the sales role there on premises. Because of that, up in Azure AD, it automatically provisions an account into Salesforce. That's pretty efficient. Well, let's think about when they move to a different department. Do they still need access to Salesforce? Do you still need to pay a license for that? I mean, that's a cloud service, right? That's a pay-as-you-go model. What if you could deprovision whenever they transition out of the sales department? What if you could run a report and see who all within the sales department was actually using Salesforce? I mean, why assign it to everybody when really only half of them use it? All of that intelligence can be yours with Azure Active Directory Premium. And that also includes FIM on premises. So hybrid identity management on premises, identity management in the cloud. Comprehensive identity and access there, spanning both on-prem and in the cloud. You have the ability to monitor, run reports, detect usage, all sorts of stuff there. And you also enable the users. I didn't even show you this. We have the end user access panel. We see there my custom branding. And again, I'm a technologist, I'm not an artist, so forgive the font size on the images. So here's the access panel. And I logged in as Adam. You can see I've got access to 2 applications. I can do Box, I can do Google. And on a tablet or a touch screen device, it's a wonderful end user experience. Touch and go SSO. You just click on the app and it'll open a new tab and you'll be in. Of course, I have to allow pop-ups. Here we go, open a new tab. I don't have a federated trust with Box, so I have to do the credential stuffing, and there you go. If I did have a federated trust, it would have ginned up a SAML token and passed it right along in the session. Also, I could see my profile, administer those multi-factor authentication, update my phone number, challenge response questions, so on and so forth. We also have group management as part of Azure Active Directory Premium. So you can see here all of your on-premises groups that came up. I happen to be the group owner of a group called Wombat. So I can see here I've got a request from Alex to join that group. I could approve it or deny it. So pretty good stuff there with Azure AD Premium, group management. We can also do self-service, password reset. So full-on identity management, tightly integrated with them on premises, but also identity there as a cloud-based service. Windows Intune. You saw this when I RDP'd into my lab. Enabling users, they get that consistent company portal. You saw the company portal with my portfolio of applications, and that's consistent across iOS, Android, and Windows. We can unify your environment with Windows Intune. You know, I mentioned earlier it's one set of casting characters on premises for traditional management. That's usually an Altiris, BigFix, or System Center conversation. In terms of mobile device management, that's largely a Mobile Iron, AirWatch, there's a bazillion of them starting up, or Windows Intune conversation. And if you think about System Center 2012, R2, and you think about Windows Intune, Intune's just another distribution point. We're the only option you have for one single console that spans traditional devices and the new mobile devices. A lot of power there, a lot of simplicity, a lot of streamlining. And then also the ability to protect your data. When that bidirectional state of trust is broken, your corporate apps are remotely wiped. Your corporate data through work folders is remotely wiped. And then also we have Azure Rights Management. You may be familiar with rights management services on premises, been around for quite a while. We have now elevated that up to be a cloud service. So instead of trying to come in and lay down a container on this device, instead of trying to turn this device into a host, which is what a lot of the other MDM companies try to do. This was never architected to be a host, to be a hypervisor. We want to leave that consumer device where you can experience all of the great functionality, which is why you bought that device to begin with. So we take an information-centric approach. We protect at the email level, we protect at the file level. Could be a Word doc, could be a PowerPoint, could be a PDF, could be whatever. And wherever that file goes, whether it's on your mobile device, on a thumb drive in your pocket, up on Dropbox, or even spammed out via BitTorrent, doesn't matter. Wherever that file goes, it's wrapped in a shroud of encryption, and it requires an AD authenticated state to be able to open it up and view the payload. And with this now being a cloud service, tight integration with Office 365, tight integration with our mobility strategy, it allows you to keep that native experience on those consumer devices and still ensure that your data is protected so that you can look at your auditors in the eye when you talk about SOX or HIPAA or PCI. There's a good one right there with credit cards. It's a pretty unique approach. And when you combine identity management, device management, and information protection, that's pretty unprecedented, all-up holistic capability to deal with users being remote with an unmanaged device and to deal with applications being out in the cloud. So we're very excited about this new Enterprise Mobility Suite. It was just announced today. So please feel free to reach out to your Microsoft account team. They can put you in touch with myself, or they can provide you with information, an estimate, maybe do more in-depth demonstrations or something to that effect. So thank you very much for your time today. I hope you enjoyed the session.